She thought lying would save her. Instead, it trapped her. The morning shift at Ray's diner was always the same. The smell of frying bacon mixed with burnt coffee, the low murmur of early risers flipping through newspapers, and the clatter of plates from the kitchen. For Mona, it was just another shift. Another day of balancing trays, plastering on a half-hearted smile, and pretending her life wasn't crumbling around her. Rent was late. Again. Her son's fever wasn't breaking, and she had no money for a doctor. And now, she was running on 3 hours of sleep. Then, he walked in. Sharp suit. Expensive watch. That air of, I own this place entitlement. Mona had dealt with his type before. They waltzed in, expecting service like they were royalty, snapping their fingers if she took more than 5 seconds to refill their cups. She hated them. But tips were tips. He sat in booth 6 right by the window. Ordered black coffee, no sugar, no cream, didn't bother looking at her when he mumbled, "Make sure it's hot." Mona did as she was told, her hands steady as she poured. The last thing she needed was to mess up. Then, right as she was about to walk away, his voice cut through the low hum of the diner. "Try not to spill it this time." Something in Mona snapped. Her fingers tightened around the handle of the coffee pot. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat, a heavy, suffocating thud. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just poured. A splash of scalding hot coffee sloshed over the rim, drenching the man's crisp white shirt. A second later, some of it hit his face. The entire diner froze. Forks stopped clinking. Conversations died. Mona's stomach plummeted. The man didn't react the way she expected. No shouting, no cursing, no jumping up and flailing like most people would if burning liquid touched their skin. Instead, he slowly reached for a napkin, dabbed at the mess, took his time. When he finally looked up at her, his expression was unreadable. Mona forced herself to breathe. She had seconds before he either exploded in rage, or worse, called the manager. Her voice cracked. "I am so sorry." His hand shot up, silencing her. He folded the napkin, set it on the table, adjusted his sleeves. Then, in a voice so calm it sent chills down her spine, he asked, "Do you have any idea who I am?" Mona swallowed hard. Maybe some high-powered lawyer. Maybe someone with enough influence to ruin her life with a single phone call. But nothing could have prepared her for what came next. The man leaned in, elbows on the table, his dark eyes locked on hers. "I own this restaurant." Her breath hitched. The entire diner was watching. Her hands started to shake, coffee pot still clutched in her grip. The weight of the moment sank in fast. She had just poured hot coffee on her boss, and now her entire life could change in a matter of seconds. But instead of reacting with rage, he just smiled. Mona's heart slammed against her ribs. The diner was still dead silent. No one so much as breathed. Even the cook, who usually yelled out orders from the back, had gone quiet. The man, her boss, just sat there, dabbing at his ruined shirt like he had all the time in the world. That eerie, unsettling smile never left his face. Her legs felt weak. She had 2 choices: beg for mercy or run. But before she could do either, he tilted his head slightly and said, "Sit." It wasn't a request. Mona hesitated. He let out a small chuckle, not loud enough for anyone else to hear, just enough to send a shiver down her spine. "I said, sit." Her knees buckled before she even realized what she was doing. Slowly she slid into the booth across from him, the coffee pot still clenched in her trembling hands. The owner, she still didn't know his name, sighed as he unbuttoned his blazer, carefully removing it and setting it beside him. The white shirt underneath was still stained. For a long moment he just studied her. Mona clenched her jaw, willing herself not to cry. She couldn't afford to lose this job. She barely scraped by as it was. Rent, her son's medicine, groceries. This diner was her lifeline. but she had poured coffee on the man who paid her. She knew how this ended. "Look," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't thinking. I just—" "Clearly." She flinched at how sharp his voice suddenly was. His fingers tapped lazily against the table. "You weren't thinking. But that's the problem, isn't it?" Mona felt her stomach twist. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She didn't know what to say, how to fix this. But then, he did something she didn't expect. He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out a money clip. Thick. Heavy. More cash than she had ever seen in one place. He peeled off a $100 bill and set it on the table. Mona blinked. Her hands instinctively curled into fists under the table. What was this? A bribe? A test? Before she could process it, he pulled out another bill. Then another, stacking them neatly, one by one, until there were at least $1,000 sitting between them. Mona's throat went dry. This wasn't just money, it was bait. "Tell me something," he said, voice quiet but steady. "What's the most expensive mistake you've ever made?" She couldn't answer. Not because she didn't know, because she knew exactly what he was doing. And it scared her. She swallowed hard, staring at the bills. It was enough to cover rent, to pay for medicine, to breathe for the first time in years. But why? Her gut screamed at her to walk away. But then he leaned in. And what he said next made her blood turn cold. "I'll give you one chance to make this right." Mona's fingers twitched under the table. The stack of bills sat between them, untouched. Each crisp hundred seemed to mock her, daring her to reach out and take it. But something about the way her boss looked at her, like a cat playing with its food, made her stomach twist. She had no idea what game he was playing. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice hoarse. His smirk widened. "There's always a catch, isn't there?" He leaned back, stretching his arms across the booth like he had all the time in the world. "The way I see it, you've got two choices. One, you take the money, walk out that door, and never step foot in this diner again." Mona's heart dropped. She knew it. This was hush money, a way to fire her without firing her. She looked at the bills again, throat tightening. Rent, groceries, medicine. It would keep her afloat, but only for a little while. She bit her cheek so hard she tasted copper. "And the second choice?" she asked, barely above a whisper. His smile flickered just for a second. "You keep your job." Mona's breath caught in her throat. "What?" "But—" He held up a hand, cutting her off. "You keep your job," he repeated. "Under one condition." The air thickened between them. He let the silence drag, like he was enjoying watching her squirm. Then finally, he leaned forward and said, "You owe me." Mona's pulse hammered. "Owe him what?" She swallowed. I don't understand." Her boss studied her, his dark eyes unreadable. Then he exhaled, shaking his head slightly like he was disappointed. "I gave you an easy way out," he said, nodding toward the money. "You don't want it? Fine. That means you belong to me now." Mona's skin prickled. She hated how he said that. "Not in the way you're thinking," he added, almost amused. "Relax. I'm not some creep." But somehow, that didn't make her feel any better. "What do you want?" she forced herself to ask. The owner reached for his napkin again, folding it neatly before setting it aside. Then he looked her dead in the eye. "I need someone who follows orders. No questions asked." Mona's stomach twisted. This was wrong. Every bone in her body screamed at her to grab the money and run. But her son was at home with a fever, and she had nothing else. She forced herself to hold his gaze. "What kind of orders?" His smirk returned. "Oh, don't worry," he said, tilting his head slightly. "You'll find out soon enough." Mona's breath hitched. The diner felt too quiet, like the walls were closing in on her. This wasn't just about keeping her job. This was about owing a debt she didn't understand. And there was no turning back now. Mona felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down into something dark. She had no idea what this man wanted from her. No idea what kind of orders he expected her to follow. But the way he watched her, the way his fingers drummed lightly against the table, waiting, made it clear that whatever this was, it wasn't going to be simple. Her throat was dry, and yet she heard herself say, "Yes." The moment the word left her lips, something in his face shifted. Not satisfaction, not relief, just acceptance. Like he had already known what she would choose. He exhaled slowly, then slid the stack of bills across the table toward her. Good. Mona didn't touch the money. She wasn't sure she even wanted it anymore. She swallowed hard. "What do you want me to do?" The owner took his time rolling up his sleeves. Then, casually, like they were discussing the weather, he said, "Someone's going to come in here tonight asking for me. When they do, you tell them I don't exist." Mona's pulse stopped. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. She blinked. "What?" "You heard me." His voice stayed calm, almost bored. "A man's going to walk through that door, looking for me. Tall navy blue suit, probably carrying a folder." He met her eyes, expression unreadable. "You tell him I've never owned this place. You tell him you don't know who he's talking about." Mona felt ice creep up her spine. Who was coming for him? Why? She opened her mouth to ask, but he gave her a sharp look. No questions. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts. This wasn't just about keeping her job. This was something else entirely. She was being pulled into something she didn't understand. Mona's hands curled into fists. "And if I say no?" The owner smiled again. But this time there was something cold behind it. "If you say no..." He tapped the money on the table. "Then you take this, walk out that door, and pray you never see me again." Mona felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, because somehow that sounded like a threat. She glanced around the diner. People had gone back to their conversations. The cook was back to flipping eggs. The world outside kept moving like nothing had changed. But for Mona, everything had changed. And the worst part? She had no idea who she was lying for, or what she had just gotten herself into. The door swung shut behind him. The man in the navy blue suit stood just inside the entrance, scanning the diner with the kind of sharp gaze that saw everything and missed nothing. He wasn't just some random customer. He belonged somewhere else, an office, a courtroom, a place where people's lives were decided over signatures and handshakes. Mona's stomach twisted. This was him. The man her boss warned her about, the one she had to lie to. The stranger took his time, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt before stepping forward. He didn't even glance at the menu hanging above the counter. He wasn't here for food. He was here for answers. And when his gaze finally landed on her, Mona felt like her feet were nailed to the floor. The diner's usual background noise, the clinking of forks, the low hum of conversation, seemed to fade into nothing. He walked straight to the counter and rested both hands on the worn laminate surface. Calm, patient, dangerous. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was smooth, but there was something in it that made Mona's pulse jump. "I'm looking for someone." She knew what was coming. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "Owner of this place," the man continued. "I was told he runs things from here." Mona's throat tightened. This was it. Her boss's words echoed in her head. "You tell him I don't exist." Her fingers curled against her apron. This was her way out. If she did what she was told, she kept her job, kept her paycheck, kept everything she needed to survive. But if she told the truth, she had no idea what would happen. She could feel the weight of her boss's presence from across the diner. He hadn't moved, hadn't said a word, but she felt him watching her, waiting. Her palms were sweaty. She opened her mouth and hesitated, because something about this felt wrong. The man in the navy suit wasn't here to make trouble. He wasn't threatening her. But her boss. He had given her no reason to trust him. Mona looked into the stranger's eyes, and in that moment she made a choice. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "I don't know who you're talking about." The man studied her, didn't blink, didn't move. She held her breath. Then slowly, he exhaled and straightened. "Is that so?" Mona nodded, her fingers gripping the counter so tightly her knuckles turned white. For a moment, he just watched her. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the counter. "If you remember anything," he said, "call me." Then he turned and walked out. The door shut behind him. The diner came back to life. Conversations resumed. The cook shouted an order. Someone laughed. But Mona felt sick. She turned her head just slightly toward booth 6. Her boss was still there. He was smiling, a slow, knowing smile. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it sent ice through her veins. "Good girl." Mona's stomach dropped. She had made her choice. And now, she had to live with it. Some choices don't come with right or wrong answers, just consequences. And sometimes, survival means owing a debt you might never escape. What would you have done? Let me know in the comments. I'm done.